This is my sorry for 2024, and I ain't gonna mess up no more this year. Yeah, like my remix of Ruben Studdard's Sorry 2004. Well, listen, we are 20 years later and we're still saying sorry. We're still saying sorry. So this episode starts off with me apparently thinking that those singing lessons that I had last year is going to carry me through, right? I'm over here with the vocals. It's the second time I done started it off like that. Well, here we are talking about apology languages. Now, some of you might be more familiar with the term love languages. But let me tell y'all, get into the apologies. Get into it. Okay. Because Ruben Studdard said that he ain't going to mess up no more this year. And I know that we will mess up. We will be apologizing. We will be taking accountability because I believe that the more you are in close relationship with people, the greater potential they are to hurt you, the greater potential there is for that hurt. It's just what it is. So it is important to know how to apologize, when to apologize, which isn't very much in the apologies language framework around the when, but for sure the how. But we can discuss the root, we can discuss the when, we can discuss all those things up in the power portal. What's up, y'all? Tune in, tap in. What's up? So, apology languages, there's 5 of them. We'll get into it. They give people the roadmap, right? Of not only giving apologies, but also figuring out how you like it to be given to you. Okay. It's the giving and the receiving. And let me start with this framework because I'm a survivor. You know, abuse is real, especially if you've been abused by narcissists. And toxic people, abusive people, they will use sorry for manipulation. And I will say that because of my past trauma with people who say sorry and they don't really be meaning it. Okay. Can you relate? And they don't really be meaning it. And they use it as a way to just move on. Like, apologies are not there to appease, okay? It's not about appeasing the next person so you can move on with your day, enjoying your weekend. Let's just enjoy the rest of this vacation. I'm sorry. No, 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 no. All right. So I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about those situations because that's a whole separate podcast episode, right? The manipulation of it all. We're talking about people who want to practice being sincere, being genuine, being heartfelt. The people who want to avoid the apologies that's like, I'm sorry, but you were out of pocket. So that's why I did what I needed to do because you was wilding. You want to avoid the I'm sorry if my comment was inappropriate to you. I'm sorry if my comment offended you, right? If that's the key word there. If because it wasn't inappropriate to that person, not a if, that's how they feel. Or this one really gets to me. This one gets me in my feelings. The people who want to avoid the I'm sorry that you feel hurt. Okay. I'm sorry that you feel upset. Now, when we say that, we are saying, we're putting it on the other person. We're saying you're easily upset. You're easily provoked. You're sensitive, which sensitive is not bad, y'all. That'll be more on that. Right. But you're putting it on the other person. You're like, you tend to be upset. So sorry you feel that way instead of taking the ownership. So this episode is if you want to dive deeper into how you want to be apologized to and how you want to lean into apologizing in a way that centers the person that you're apologizing to. Because apologies aren't about us. It's about the other person. It's about centering what they need, right? And people do want to feel like you're being genuine. They do want to feel like you're coming from the heart. They do want to feel like you're practicing sincerity. And so I want you to think about those times. This is before we go into it. I want you to think about those times that people apologized to you and they thought it was landing. And you were like, It ain't genuine. Now, we want to move away from the things genuine may not look and sound the same, right? So, for example, people kind of, I know in my life, people feel like I am sincere and genuine when I'm crying, right? They're like, if she not busting a tear, if she not crying, she don't mean it. Now, this is where you can make space for some nuance here. You can be genuine, you can be sincere, you can come from the heart without having to express that type of feeling, right? Or that type of behavior of crying. So the apology languages give us that. It doesn't even speak too much on even tone, because we know those people, well, obviously expressing remorse and like having a more softer, compassionate tone is helpful. We also don't want to tone police. We also don't want to tell people, well, you didn't say it in this tone of voice. You didn't cry. You didn't look at me in my eyes and rub my back. Because now we're talking about other things, right? So let's start with, before we get into the crux of it, where do we learn to apologize? So I want you to think when you first learned about when to say sorry. Oftentimes, we think about that being something that's taught to us by our family, whoever those family members are who give us that foundation, right? It could be parents, it can be grandparents, it can be aunts, it can be foster parents. I mean, whoever was there for that socialization. It could also be school. I know that as an educator, when I was teaching preschool, a lot of this came up, right? Like I'll hear teachers say sorry. You hit her, say sorry, right? Remember that time, that the first time someone told you you were a child, who and what was that like? Who was the one that told you? And what was that like when they said, say sorry? You just smacked your sister, say sorry. Okay. You cursed at your brother, say sorry, right? So we're taught, especially growing up, I'm an 80s baby, but growing up in the 90s, I keep thinking about like the timeouts, which typically isn't done now. This whole concept of go in the corner. I want you to think about what you did. Well, once again, apologies is actually thinking about the other person. So I wonder what it would look like if we were taught to go into a space. It don't have to be the corner. It don't have to even be another room. It could be just go into a space that feels good for you, your thinking place, your reflective place, and think about the impact on the person. How do you think that your words landed on that person? Because if we were able to have that empathy muscle built at that age, I think a lot of us would be better off. But if you're like me and you went back into that childhood area of your life, that childhood time in your life, you probably were told to say sorry in a specific tone that was punitive, right? Like, say sorry right now, right? And it becomes a word that you say to just get out of conflict, right? And to just make things better, which kind of goes back to what I shared in the beginning, like the appeasing, sweep under the rug. Okay, you happy now? We happy now? Let's go play. I said sorry to my sister. I'm just gonna go play, right? And then we're not doing the actual work of what an apology is supposed to do, which is once again centering the other person. And there's a few other components too, which the apology languages give us great language for. So now this work, do whatever internet research you need to do to take the quizzes. If you're like me, I love a good quiz. Tell me about myself. Break me down. Tell me, not break me down like that, but break down the things that I do and analyze it. I love it. So take your apology languages quizzes, watch the videos on it, read the book on it, all of those things. But in here, I'm going to break them down. I'm going to use some of the languages that was used in the book and the framing. And then other ones I'm just not, because a lot of this language that you'll find when you do your research, if you do your research after this, you'll find that it's really like in this religious component. And so we're going to frame it in a general way, right? So the first apology language is expressing regret. So it could sound like, I shouldn't have done that. It's acknowledging with in an emotional way. Now, I know, and I'll get to like some challenges and things like that, but this piece around expressing regret, and then I'm also going to highlight the ones that are very much my vibe because I've taken the quiz. Like I said, I love stuff like that. Um, and so I'll give a little bit of that as I'm breaking it down too. So expressing regret, it does involve for you to tap into your emotion and your emotional expression, right? It does involve, I think all of these do, but specifically this involves a certain level of emotional intelligence, a certain level of emotional maturity. And for some people, they're not wired that way, right? They're not wired to tap in from an expressive place. And once again, y'all, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're crying. That could mean that you're crying if you're expressing, in an emotional way, the regret, and you're saying, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done, this harm. But expressing it in an emotional way, using feelings, using it in a way, tap into your adjectives. Okay. Let's get into it. That's what the expressing regret is, right? It's a certain level of acknowledgement that comes along with emotion. So it's not just very heady, it's very heart centered, right? The second apology language. Now, for me, okay, these next three, that's my jam right here. If you trying to apologize to me, tap into all three of these because while there are five apology languages and there's five love languages, many of us, I know me, I'm like that. Many of us want a combination. Like the love languages, I want all five. Yeah, I got my top three, my number one, but I really want all five, right? So with this, let's not be stuck on, okay, I'm only going to do it this way because most people want a combination. So my combination is going to be this one, the next, and the following. Okay. So we got expressing regret out the way. That's number one. Number two, accepting responsibility. Oh, baby. For me, for me, top three, critical, right? So that means you're taking total ownership. That sounds like I was wrong that I raised my voice. I was wrong for not following up after I said that I would, right? You're admitting fault and you're not putting the blame on anyone else except you. That is so critical to take that ownership. Ooh, I'm feeling it in my heart because when people say those things to me, I really be like, thank you so much. I need to know that you know what you did was wrong. Because I know for me, a pet peeve is when people are like, I didn't even know that I hurt. What? I hurt you? Oh my God. All right, now, come on. You know you raised your voice. You know you said a comment that was universally messed up. Come on now. And so something about the ownership, something about, I remember someone apologized to me in a way that made me cry one time, but I was crying in the best way. They were like, I was judging you when I was talking to you in this way. I was coming from a judgmental place. I was wrong for doing that. I cried because I was like, this is my love language. This is my love language, right? Words of affirmation. So you accepting responsibility is also affirming what has happened, right? It's affirming the harm. So I want to name that some of these you can kind of fuse with the love languages as well. So accepting responsibility is super, super important. Love that. That's my jam, right? So boom, we got expressing regret, one. Two, accepting responsibility. Now we're going to creep on over to number three. Another one that is my jam. This is part of my top three. And I'm reframing it. It's not used in this way. The next two aren't really written in this way in the framework of the apology languages. But once again, we're going to cater it to a way that is non-biblical and things like that. So this third one is about making it right. It sounds like, I know I hurt you. I know I messed up. There's no excuse for that. What can I do to make it up to you? Now, think about your love language here. Because I recently had to think about this. When people say, what can I do to make it up to you? It's really beautiful. And if you know my love language, you might know what that might look like. So, for example, if my love language, my top three, right, are words of affirmation, acts of service, and gifts. Those are my love languages right now where I'm at in my life. It has changed in the past. So if someone knows me from the past, oh, that was your love language. Yeah, it changed, right? Those are my top three right now. So if a person has harmed me and they want to make it right, they can probably stay within those areas, right? To essentially make it right. So I like that this puts it on the person to ask the question, but I also think that if you've caused the harm, a step further, right, could also have some ideas, because I also don't like to have to give people, like, while this is a roadmap, I'm also not trying to coddle and handhold you through this, especially if we're in relationship for a minute, right? So the what can I do to make it up to you? I might have very specific things that you could do, but I also may not. So you might want to follow up after, or you might say, hey, would you like this? Like for me, you might want to give me a matcha latte. Okay. You know what? I was thinking about you. I know I want to make it right. I know I messed up. I know that I wasn't supposed to bop, 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 bop. But you know what? On my way home, I thought of you. Here's a green tea matcha latte with oat milk, 4 pumps of classic syrup. Okay. I might want that. Or I might need you to be like, you know what? Let me massage your body. Let me oil your scalp. I might want that. Right now, obviously, that's if you my wife. Don't ease up, right? But it may look like those things, right? That's an act of service for me, right? It may look like an affirmation, whatever way, right? So I think that it's important to think through knowing the importance of making it right and thinking about what you can do to make it up. How can I fix it? So this tends to be easier for the fixers, the people who are like, oh, I know how to do that. I love to fix it. I love to make it right. Boom. So boom, that's my jam. So now that was 3. So now we're going to dance on over the plan for change, which once again, I'm renaming it, but it's the same concept. So plan for change. You're expressing a deep pain, right? You are saying, I want to not do what I just did to cause you harm, and I want to prevent that from in the future. So what steps do I need to do, right, to not lose my temper? What steps do I need to do to not do this thing that caused you harm, right? So maybe that means that you're like, you know what, going forward, I'm going to send you a text before I leave the house. So that way I'm not keeping you waiting, right? You're thinking of ways to not only to think about preventing things from happening in the future, because some people feel like sorry without changed behavior is manipulation. For me, it's a major pet peeve when people keep apologizing over and over and over about the same things. Where is your change process? And now maybe I might want to give you some support in that, right? Because some people in this area, they may ask you, hey, just like the last one, they're asking the person, what can I do to make it up to you? This person may say, well, how can I be better next time? What would you like for me to do in the future? Now, once again, for me personally, I'm not trying to see, because I feel like I'm your healer. I feel like I'm your life coach. I need you to find your own tools. But this is about tools and this is about change. And that's important. Now, the piece about this that is really critical is not being like, I'm sorry I got caught, right? A lot of the times, like, I think I heard a story of this person was like, they were late, for an event, and they apologized because it was clear and they got caught sneaking in through the back, and they apologized. That's not the same. We don't want you to apologize. This framework is not apologizing because you got caught. This framework is apologizing because you're like, I am deeply pained by what I did to you. I am deeply hurt that I caused hurt. I am deeply saddened that I made you sad, right? So it comes from that place. All of them come from a heartfelt place, but it's not about, oh, you caught me. It's about, I'm genuinely, sincerely, compassionately pained. Like, I'm in my feelings. I'm in my bag, right? This is my jam. Okay, these last 3, that's my jam. Turn me up. Turn me up on accepting responsibility. Turn me up on making it right. Turn me up on plan for change. What you about to do in the future to make this not happen again? Love it. Love it. What are your tools? What's your toolbox giving? Now we land on the 5th one, requesting forgiveness. And this sounds like, will you please forgive me? I need your forgiveness. This means that you see forgiveness as a gift, right? You understand that it is a gift. And so this request, right? Some people, if they're harmed, a sorry isn't just enough. They want you to say, will you please forgive me? I know that your forgiveness would mean so much to me. I need it. I gotta have it. So they're asking. I will say, for me, it's not quite my shit, but at the same time, I understand this one because for some people, they need to have you make that request. And that's what this is all about. Right. So to wrap it up, just in case you didn't take notes, because that's all right. You don't got to do that. The 5 love languages in a reframing context, because you might research this and say, oh, wait a minute. What about repentance? Well, I'm not using that language because we ain't talking about church. Okay. So 1, expressing regret. 2, accepting responsibility. 3, making it right. 4, planning for change. And 5, requesting forgiveness. Now, what happens when you struggle with apologizing? Now, this is a controversial point, y'all, and I would love for you to think through what this answer is for you. Do you feel like you should apologize when you know you haven't done anything wrong? So an example of that is someone's blaming you for something that you know you did not do, right? So let's say as a child, let's use that in the framework since we talked about that's where people are typically learning. That's like, will you forgive me? Please say sorry type of vibes, right? We're taught that then or not. Maybe some people weren't taught to apologize. Wait a minute. That's a that's a thought. Hmm. But maybe there's something that happens, right? When you're like, I didn't do anything wrong. So if you think about when you were a child and maybe your parent accused you of taking the last cookie from the jar, okay? Or that little box or the little bag, whatever the cookie was in, okay? They accused you of taking the last cookie, but it wasn't you. Maybe it was your cousin Pookie. Maybe Pookie took the cookie. Pookie took the cookie. It wasn't you. And now you're being blamed. And now you're being told to apologize. But you ain't do nothing wrong. What you do? Do you think you should apologize for things that you did not do wrong? And now someone can say in that scenario, maybe it's a little clear. There are other scenarios where people are like, you did do me wrong. You did do me wrong. You did do me wrong. And you really sit with it and you're like, I didn't. I just didn't. Right. I had a scenario. I'll be vulnerable here. I had a scenario where, I laughed in a situation where the person didn't know that I was going to laugh, right? They shared something and I laughed because I was like, well, what? And the person felt very harmed, right? And very hurt that I laughed. And I had to really sit with it. And I was like, huh. Now, laughing is a very typical emotion. I mean, way of responding to something. If something sounds outrageous, you ever like laugh like, wow, like what? You know what I mean? And I sat with it in a moment and I said, okay, so should I apologize or should I talk about impact? And I had to sit with it because for me, I don't want to just say sorry just to say sorry. I want to really, really mean it. And I had to really think like, yes, the impact of my laughing caused harm, for sure. And I didn't genuinely feel like I was wrong to do it. So now we're hello controversy, you've entered the chat. So now it's controversial, right? Because on one hand, it's like apologize, just apologize, okay? Cuz just you hurt the person's feelings. Or you say, well, I didn't really do anything wrong. Laughing isn't wrong And especially in this context, it's a response that maybe didn't feel good to you, right? Or not maybe, it didn't feel good to you. However, I don't feel like I did something wrong. Oh, controversy. You might be listening to this and being like, what? That's wild. I would just apologize. But for me, because I believe that apologies are so strong and I just don't say them flippantly, I just don't say them just because it wants to make the person feel better. I rather acknowledge impact. I rather say, I realize that my laughing hurt you. Right. I might even use some of the plans for change and I'll say, going forward in the future, I'll be a lot more mindful about how I respond because I recognize that's bad. So I actually use the component of plan for change, but at the same time, I'm not. If I don't feel like what I did was wrong, saying the I'm sorry is something that I don't feel is fair to the person because I feel like that is saying that I genuinely feel that what I did was wrong. Like I'm like, nah. What sometimes I'm like, that was a valid response. I've said stuff and people have laughed. And I might have I may or may not have felt hurt, depending on what that scenario was. But were they wrong for that? Right? Or being accused of things. I've definitely been accused of things from childhood to adulthood of things that I'm like, I wasn't wrong because wrong is subjective. And I think when it is about apologizing to the person, you have to center the person. But sometimes when we do this work around apology and accountability, we also have to take on the fact that loving people will mean that we share things and we'll respond in ways that doesn't feel good. Right? Ooh, we getting juicy. We getting juicy. Hopefully you're able to think through that controversial story that I shared and think about what you would do. Have you said sorry just to make the situation go away? Have you said sorry because you want to make the person feel better? Right? Now, what happens when you genuinely struggle with apologizing? Right. So not because so like you feel like what you did was wrong, but you're like, I don't want to apologize though. I know what I did was wrong, but I ain't going to say sorry because sorry means I'm weak. Well, some reasons why people struggle with apologizing is that it's very vulnerable to be in that space of saying I was wrong. You can feel rejected if that person doesn't accept your apology. You don't want to get in trouble. A lot of the times our childhood trauma around, oh my gosh, I messed up. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm so messed up. I'm going to get in trouble. So you make excuses instead of apologizing. You lie instead of apologizing. You blame other people instead of apologizing. These are some of the obstacles that come up. Another obstacle is our perfectionism, right? This believing that admitting fault means that you're less worthy, that admitting fault means that you're less valuable, tying your ego and your pride to withholding the apology is a power dynamic, right? This piece around, I'm right, you're wrong, actually, I'm right, you're wrong. And when we struggle with apologizing, when we know we're wrong, we're struggling with empathy, which is why I think it is important to think, even when you are apologizing because you feel like you're wrong, or when someone expressed that they want an apology from you and maybe you just don't feel like what you did was wrong, how can you use empathy in all scenarios? Right? Empathy and plan for change. Because I do think, like I said, if people are telling you you caused me harm, even if you don't feel like you've harmed them, and like I said, this is a very nuanced piece because, and it's a slippery slope because we don't want to gaslight people. We don't want to say your feelings don't matter. There's a way to validate the harm. There's a way to validate the impact, but also feeling true to yourself and saying, well, I don't feel like what I did was wrong, but I do realize that I hurt you. That's very valid. Very valid. Right? So, what happens when the other person doesn't want to accept your apology? So, you do all of the things, you do a combination of the 5 apology languages, right? A little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And the person is like, nah, I don't want to hear that shit. I've definitely been in those scenarios. I'm like, I don't want your sorry. I don't want your apology. Usually because they're not apologizing in a way that feels good for me. But sometimes there's people who you can apologize all day. I ain't fucking with you, right? Which we'll get to. But what happens when the other person doesn't want to accept your apology? They're not ready or they just don't want to. So there's a few things you can do. You just leave the apology there. Don't no backseas. Don't be like, you know what? I don't even mean it. I don't even mean that shit. I take that sorry back. No, no, no. Leave it there. You apologize. Let that be right there. Let it sit. Let it marinate. You don't want to be defensive, right? And defensiveness is so hard because you can feel like attacked, right? You're like, I'm vulnerable with you. I'm raw with you. I came to you with such like humility and you just not going to accept my apology. So then sometimes defensiveness shows up. So it's recognizing within your body, you're not being attacked. Sit with the emotions, whether you're hurt, sit with the emotions of whether you're confused. Like, I don't know why this person is not accepting the apology. I did this, this, and this. What's up? You want to give them some more time. I had an instance where I told someone, I was like, it was a friend at the time. And I was like, I need about a month or so to revisit this. And then maybe a week shy of the month, they were like, you know what? You took too much time. We're just not going to be friends. Right. And listen to the previous episode about friendship breakups. Cause, yeah, I didn't include them in that, but yeah, that was a friendship breakup because I was like, dang, give me the time. Give me the full time, actually, right? It wasn't even the full month. So giving people the time, giving people the space, also showing with actions, right? We know the terminology actions speak louder than words. Now, I think it depends on your love language. For me, I like the words and the action. You know what I mean? But pairing it with some actions while respecting their boundaries is important. And that's important, right? So if the person is like, do not hit me up until December 25th, and then you're over here outside with a boombox in the rain, like a 90s romance movie, and you just talking about all of the things, and you're like, I miss you so much. It's like, yo, give me the time, respect my boundaries. I said, don't hit me up until this date. Right? And what can you do during that time? Well, you can take this time to work on yourself, revisit the issue, right? Revisit that and say, what are the ways that I've caused harm? What are the ways that I could truly plan for change? Right. So you're sitting with the emotions and you're thinking about what change can look like. Do the self work as you are giving the person space and as you are giving them time. Now, you want to follow up with respect to their boundaries. So once again, if they said, hey, follow up with me, or I need up until December 25th. So you follow up during that time that they've laid out for you, and you revisit that issue with that person with compassion and no expectation that they're actually going to reconcile. Because they may still, you might have them up on December 25th and they still might be like, no, I actually sat with it and I don't want to forgive you. I don't accept your apology. Because this is not necessarily about repair and it's not necessarily about reconciliation. That's different. That's another layer, right? Now, if you are on the receiving end, so let's say you're like, you know what? I'm on the receiving end. I do want to apologize. What do? Well, you lean into a place of forgiveness. People always talk about, well, forgiveness is for me, right? Apology centers the person who's been harmed, but forgiving, right? Forgiving people really leans into your heart space. Now, it's hard to do when you're wounded, but it's possible with time, with work, right? I've had instances where I'm like, I'm never going to forgive this person ever. Ever, 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 never gonna forgive, never gonna forgive. But then I did. But then I did. Now, most times it does not come with reconciliation. It doesn't come with repair, but I forgave them from my heart. I forgave them because I want to have a forgiving heart. for the people that I do want to repair with and the people that I do want to reconcile with. Having a forgiving heart makes it so that I can build and retain connections with people that I actually want in my life. Because forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness does not mean that we're automatically going to go back to how it once was before the trauma, before the harm. Forgiveness doesn't mean that feelings from what you did to me won't come up. And listen, I have PTSD. So when you have post traumatic stress disorder, it can feel really hard to not relive those memories and embody those memories. So I can think back on a situation that someone did, and I could be like, this motherfucker really had me fucked up, and I'm angry all over again. Okay? So forgiveness means that also making space for those feelings to come up. And so what I do when those feelings come up, I'll dance it out. I'll listen to some music. I might cry it out, right? I might go to my altar. I might meditate. I might pray. I don't let those feelings of anger, of sadness, of hurt control my behavior in the present and in the future. And that is a motherfucking work. That's the work. That's the work. And while it doesn't mean that forgiving you means that I automatically trust you, it does create the pathway for it, right? Forgiveness can help you build that trust. Forgiveness can help you move forward because we are going to let each other down. If you love someone, there's a lot of possibility. Like I said, the higher potential for the closest people to you. Studies have shown and lived experience has shown that the people closest to you will hurt you the most. For me, I always say, coming from a household where my dad wasn't around and I had a tumultuous relationship with my mom, that means the two people that are responsible directly for my existence on this earth have hurt me. They've harmed me, right? And yet I know that forgiveness is there in my heart for them. Doesn't mean that I want to be in relationship. It doesn't mean that I necessarily want to move forward in relationship with them, but it does mean that I can have that forgiveness as a choice for me so that I can feel better within my body. Right? I think that's super, super, super important. Ooh, take a breath. Take a breath with me. Take a breath with me right here. Because when we talk about apology languages, it can be something that activates different times that people didn't apologize to us. It can activate scenarios where we apologized incorrectly. It can activate feelings of people who said, I don't forgive you. It can activate feelings of where you're like, but can I forgive myself? Can I forgive myself? I can forgive my parents. I can forgive my friends. I can forgive my partner. I can forgive my coworkers. I can forgive my neighbors. I can forgive but can I forgive myself? Well, next time on the Power Portal, we'll be exploring just that. So tap into your power, right? Tap into any pain because we can transmute our hurt and our sadness and our pain into our power. Thank you for listening to the Power Portal.